All of this is up to this point. We're talking about the blending, the relevance, the roles in the organization. They're all setting us up for how do we think now about the actually technology ecosystem. And so I've organized the technology ecosystem from an organizational intent layers. So there are other folks who have really informative models that look at this slightly differently. I've decided to take more of an approach from an organizational intent. What are they trying to get out of the platform? So when you think about the first layer here under the point of learning side, so this is the learning ecosystem. When you look at it, this is where are the learners going to go in order to get the information they need at that first point. When I want to learn something, where do I go? Historically, it used to maybe be the LMS. Now we're seeing more where you have curation platforms being the portal and the architecture for being able to bring in a range of learning experiences that wrap around that. Or some organizations are actually creating these dynamic HTML5 portals, which are skins that layer over the whole ecosystem. But where this is one of the first questions is where are they going to go? That central point of access. When I need to learn something, where do I go? When you look at the next one, it's really how are they going to connect with it? And there's so many different ways that I can now interact with the ecosystem. I can have my own mobile device. I can have a company owned or provided device. I have a laptop or a desktop unit. I may have wearable technologies, whether it's, it could be a watch, it could be a heads-up display, it could be a variety of things that you have around there, but there are many more ways in which folks are now interacting in the ecosystem. It's important that you understand how they're going to interact with the system, but most importantly, you want to create things that are responsibly designed, that you build it and it can actually play across or be portable across all of these different accessibility points. Measurement and analytics. I've got a layer here that takes a look at saying, how will you know when something's working so that you can be able to prove that it's working or improve it as you're going, or feed back data to the learners so they can self-adjust as they're going through, or to the business stakeholders so they get insights as part of the system. There's this whole layer that's important from the organization of mapping to how do we actually track that? And it's more than just looking at the 4 or 5 layer, whether you're Kirkpatrick or Phillips aligned in whichever camp you are, but you definitely want to look at, what's the experience, what was the overall with that level 1, level 2, did they actually master the content? Do they know it? Could they pass a test? Really that's that base layer. Then you get to level 3 and 4, which is looking at transfer. Did they actually take it back to the workplace, or getting into it on that return on investment? Was the investment in it to really get back to us? It's more than just looking at those systems or saying that I have those. The real thing is that while the frameworks and the models, Kirkpatrick or Phillips, talk a lot about what you need to measure, they don't talk about sustainability. How do we actually get ongoing data so we don't have to stop and spend $50,000 to figure out whether a $125,000 initiative worked or not? The idea is, how can we start to build into our ecosystem a way that we can actually pull data and get that on an ongoing system to know what's working? Then you bring in things like experience and engagement data across the LXP, the learning experience platforms, the connection points out there. How are people engaging? There are so many platforms, and we'll see in the next layer. Across all those points, there are many pieces of data we can actually track, which are naturally more insight into the progressions, the efficacy, the confidence. There's so many points that we can bring into this. Then you have the adaptive platforms where you're able to create personalized learning paths based on your competency in an area. You'll be able to now focus, instead of on an exposure strategy, you're going to a competency. And so if I am less competent than my peer may progress faster through it than I do. They're getting a personalized learning journey. There's some really great things, but that has a lot of data that you can pull into that, not only looking at first-time learning, but over time, how do they retain it? At what point, how many months, weeks later, did they start to forget that before application came in? There are ways you can pull new data points in it. And then the last one on the right is really thinking about the analytics layer of how do you bring all the data from not only the learning LXPs, all these different points, and then wrapping it in with critical business data to really, inform what I consider evidence-based business decisions. You're now using data to draw insights, and that's where it goes from being dynamic in many ways to being smart in an organization. The next one is really the experience layer, and this is where you've seen a lot of growth and expansion, with new types of platforms out there. You've got learning paths, digital learning paths. You have what I'd go cohort-based learning, which, some people call as a MOOC. I think it's actually, the MOOC has evolved a lot to a much more precise, powerful tool than it had been historically when it started. I mean, it's been around since, I believe, the 80s as a concept, and it has definitely evolved dramatically over the time. The use of a chat bot or AR, VR, or mixed reality, where you're bringing in augmented plus virtual reality into a learning event, social elements, gamification. There's a lot of things that really blow out, but this is all about the experience and the journey and others that are coming through on this. So there's the experience layer, and this is where the analytics is looking about how do I pull the right data across each of these. And these are really powerful tools at giving us insights that historically we just haven't had access to. The next one is, this is inside the organization, your content management, or as I like to call it, your content engagement strategy. Where are you going to develop and author and publish? How are you going to serve it up from a multimedia standpoint so it's bandwidth friendly, it's accessible at the point I can get to it, it's where I need it? I look at, digital asset management. How do I actually, of all the assets I have out there, how am I actually managing the life and the evolution of those? How do I get to be able to repurpose and reuse them across the multiple points of application? I can use them in different points to meet a range of moments of learning need. So, for example, a new employee onboarding program may have some insights or application, but it's set for a new hire. I may take that without all the context around it, and maybe actually a support piece later on to meet a moment 3, 4, and 5 down the road. So you think about that and says, how do I structure my creation of my assets to be reused across a range of moments of need, across a range of platforms? And then the next layer is just really looking at this learning assets, and this is the atomic building blocks of the overall ecosystem. These are the things that you recombine and put across here. And again, what you're looking at is for portability, playability, all of those things so that it can be reused and consumed with intentionality across the overall ecosystem. Now, what I've just gone through, and I know there's a lot in here, and a lot of folks ask me and says, why don't you simplify this, make it easier for people to look at it. I said, what I wanted to do is to make sure that people understand that it is more complex than it ever has been. I'm trying to drive as an organization, how do we use these technologies to drive an outcome with it? But the fact of the matter is it is more complex than ever. If we'd have taken a snapshot 10 years ago, this would have been a lot thinner, a lot fewer blocks behind that. Now, before I go on here, it is important, the caveat is that I am not saying that an organization needs absolutely every one of these. You don't have to fill in every block. The idea is from an ecosystem is to understand what you need and which ones are important for you, what you have, and as you look at a roadmap over time, how you may strategically add to your ecosystem, making sure that they play well together. The importance is not just what's in the boxes, but it's really the organizational design around the technology to make sure that you're getting the connective tissue between these parts. That's really where the strategy comes in, is how do you bring all these pieces together? Now, what's really exciting is on the right-hand side, the point of work. So a lot of that was about the point of learning, and this is where we've seen a lot of great expansion. In the upper right-hand corner, I talk a lot about collaborative workspaces, for example. There are a lot of things in that space, but probably many of you are familiar with like Slack or Microsoft Teams are probably two of the bigger ones, just as an example for what they are. But if you think about a Microsoft Teams, it's a place where people come together, they collaborate around a project or an initiative, and they're able to do it. But imagine if instead of having to leave my collaboration space and go into the learning space, if all my learning ported into the point of collaboration. So let's say, for example, I have a team that's going to be employing Safe Agile as a strategy. We're going to run a project or an initiative that employs that. I could, in advance of setting up the kickoff date of the project that begins a month from now, I can actually start to build the collaboration space, wrap the team and the team members with the assets, the refreshers, the resources in the collaborative space, things that will help them get to this, or access to remediation if they need to build things up. But now I'm designing at the point of work. And that's where you think about the point of learning, is that when I leave to go in that cycle, I can also bring it directly into the point of collaboration. You have the actual work platforms, which are important. It's like where I'm doing my work, whether it's a sales call, planning tool, or something else. I'm wrapping, support into the work platform, kind of moving down the list. My HCM suite, where I'm looking at skills and skills analytics and things like that, and really making sure that I've got that growth across roles as we're moving forward. External sites, because we know that we don't have all the answers inside our organization. And then the last one are really getting access to the work-specific pieces. But this is the overarching larger ecosystem. It's become more complicated, but what's important is, as an organization, from a learning leader standpoint, is that not only do you need to know really who you're building for or architecting, but the strategy itself needs to drive to the key tenets that I was talking about, as well as understanding the overall how the technology in and of itself. Without a good strategy, the technology doesn't really help. The tools have to be applied. They have to be brought together to be connected. You can still have some outcome with them, but if you're not really maximizing or optimizing their use, you're missing out on part of that critical return on that investment.